welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And it is officially the beginning of our Alien month. We're going to be going back and watching the remaining 4 Alien movies throughout the course of January to... I don't know why we decided this, but like nothing else is going on in January, and we've seen the first 2.
Because fuck you, it's January, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. To quote Red Letter Media, as we did last year, fuck you, it's January. So we're going to do what we want to do.
Did Hurricane Heist come out last January? Is that what happened as a result of this?
That came out in, like, March.
Oh, okay. Because if it did come out in January, then I think this is a wise course of action. But I think you're right. I think it was slightly later.
I will say, just because I want to talk about January movies for a second before we talk about Alien 3, because I don't want to talk about Alien 3. The fucking Escape Room movie actually looks surprisingly good.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. I saw a couple previews for stuff that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't actually mind talking about that on the podcast maybe. But then again, I am a sucker for all things Alien, so this is good. I'm not complaining about this course of action.
I'll say if we're gonna do it, right now is the best time to just suck it up and go for it.
Yes, and these are all the movies that I am less familiar with. I saw Covenant like twice when it came out in theaters, so that one's a little fresher on the mind. But Alien 3, Resurrection, Prometheus, I saw Prometheus once in the theater. The other 2, I had the full box set of all the classic Alien movies when I was like 10. And so I watched Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection one time each. So coming back and revisiting them is kind of an experience.
Is there not an Alien Homecoming?
No.
Why the fuck am I positive that there's an Alien Homecoming?
Well, it might be, because I remember I almost got tricked into this as a kid. Like, the Asylum films, like Atlantic Rim, it might be something like that, because I remember that on the Family Video store shelves, when I was a wee lad, I wanted to rent Alien 3000 and Alien vs. Hunter, neither of which are real Alien films, but try to trick you into thinking they are based on the box art and the title. So it could be something like that?
No. No, because I'm positive Alien Covenant's called Alien Homecoming.
Oh.
I have literally no idea why. And, like, I forget that Prometheus exists. I think Prometheus is Alien Covenant, and I think Alien Covenant's called Alien Homecoming.
Oh.
And
have they revealed, like, maybe is Alien Homecoming the title of, like, the theoretical third one that they're making? Because Covenant, I guess, like, no spoilers, but it leaves itself open to a sequel.
Shocker. No, I don't know, maybe. I don't think so. I just, for whatever reason, have Alien Homecoming stuck in my head. And it's totally not a thing.
Well, we're coming home. We're homecoming to Alien 3, David Fincher's first theatrical film that he has disavowed because of what a nightmare of a production it was.
And what a nightmare of a movie it is.
Well, I'm just going to tell the good people right now that I have forged a new identity for myself, and that identity is being a staunch defender of mediocre third movies and trilogies that nobody likes. Because, a couple weeks ago, Sean and I were here to defend Spider-Man 3, and here I am to tell you people that Alien Cubed, Alien to the Third Power, as the notation on the title seems to be saying. It is a very hard movie to like for a lot of reasons. But like it I do. And hopefully you will see why if maybe you are doubting me, because I'm sure the general audience reaction is much closer to Sean's, which I completely understand.
I mean, I'm overstating my opinion of the movie, honestly. I don't really think it's a nightmare. More than anything, I was just kind of exhausted by it. We watched the extended version, or the... what's it called?
The assembly cut. I think specifically because that is in the quadrilogy like box set that I have. It specifically said that like this was the cut presented to the higher ups, and that's what got changed, and so that's why a lot of the audio is kind of weird. Like they had to recover some of it. So I think, I haven't seen the theatrical version in quite some time, so I don't remember exactly how different it is. But I think it's
45 minutes worth of different.
Yeah, I think it's pretty substantially different.
So yeah, we watched that version. It's not called the assembly cut on my quadrilogy. It's just called like the special edition or something. So that was what we ended up watching, and it, more than anything, I was just kind of exhausted by it. That's kind of where I'm at even recording this. I told Jackson before we started, like, the biggest condemnation I can say of it is like, I'm exhausted even thinking about talking about this movie. It's not horrible. It's not the worst thing I've ever watched by a long shot. It's not even like so mediocre. Like, there's some somewhat interesting things to it. It's just really long and surprisingly boring in a lot of respects. The last hour is just a slog to sit through. And I mean, even beyond that, a lot of the stuff before that is kind of boring. There's a little bit towards the beginning that I think is pretty interesting. But it quickly devolves into just, I'm ready for a nap now. And that's to say nothing of just weird musical choices in the background. Just the cinematography is clearly aping the first Alien movie and Aliens in a lot of respects. So like some shots that were very effective in those movies are just super not in this one. Like I think to one point in particular where the alien shows up behind Ripley and like it's set up in a way where I'm like, oh, okay, it's behind her and it's going to drop down from the rafters, and whoa, it did. Which I mean, theoretically shouldn't be that much of a complaint, but I've just seen it so many times and I was already so checked out at that point that I'm like, this is nothing. This is nothing to me. This is not surprising. This isn't shocking. This isn't interesting. You're just reiterating points that you have done in your previous movies. And we'll kind of I'll let Jackson will mostly talk about the themes. Like, I won't lie to you. I'm not going to probably say much this episode just because I am tired of Alien.
Not a great start to our Alien month.
No, not at all. But I do have some interesting feelings about like the themes and how this one kind of plays off what the previous movies have done. So all of Sean's criticisms and complaints and observations are valid and true. I think the key difference in our reactions is that I was a lot more into the stuff towards the beginning, like the character interactions, and was really on the lookout for some like nice thematic analysis to dive into, because as Sean pointed out, one of my favorite lines in the movie, and I'll sort of talk about why later, but is when Ripley is sort of facing the alien and she says to it that you've been in my life for so long now, I can't remember anything else. And in our pre-discussion, Sean wondered if that was true of me, and that I have been just so invested in this franchise that I'm coming at it like looking for interesting stuff, basically. And I think that is true to a degree. I think that if you were just watching Alien 3 to enjoy some like sci-fi horror atmosphere, you're gonna be let down, because a lot of that is really boring. I think you can cut like 45 minutes to an hour, and I mean they did, but I'm not sure what they cut necessarily. I think that might be why people don't look at the theatrical version so fondly, because I think it sounds like they cut the wrong things. But the alien running around and eating people is very by the numbers, is very what you'd expect, especially now that we're like 5 sequels in or however many. And I think I remember when we had our discussion about the original Alien versus Aliens, I remember feeling, Sean, that when you had brought up the point that like the
the fact that the alien wasn't scary anymore because, the Marines are just kind of blowing him away. That's a valid point. It's a valid thing to feel about the second one, but I remember having this thought that this movie kind of confirmed for me is that I appreciate that the second movie at least tried to go for like a different tone, a different feeling, because it was going to be impossible to replicate that dreaded feeling of the first one. So if you were going to do another Alien movie, you may as well go for a different feeling, and I think the proof is in the pudding with this one.
Alternatively, you may as well not, because the first one is just about perfect, and any more is unnecessary.
I don't disagree with that. The first one is a perfect, legit masterpiece. Maybe this is just the nostalgia and me talking, but I feel like my life would be worse off without all the quips and memes from Alien. So I don't know. I'll take both like a glutton.
Thought with Aliens more than anything is just like, and I guess we're talking about Aliens and Alien for a minute. Is just that like I would have been perfectly happy if it was a different movie. Like, keep everything the same, but don't tie it in with the Alien franchise type of deal.
Yeah.
I think I would have been perfectly happy with it, and I probably would have liked it just as much. Like, I would have been down with it. Kind of like a Predator type of deal.
Yeah, okay.
But I just, as I said, like, I feel like at this point, anything beyond the first is unnecessary. But I'm hoping to be proved wrong. I'm looking forward most right now to Prometheus, actually. Just because I hear such polarizing things about it, that I'm very curious to see where I fall on that one. I know some people who haven't watched the Alien movies before found it really boring. Other people who hadn't really liked it. Other people who have seen the Alien movies before really liked it. Other people hated it. So it feels very polarizing, and I'm excited to weigh in on that one, honestly.
I'm excited to go back to Prometheus 2 because I don't know. I remember when I first saw it in the theater, I liked it well enough. But I didn't really have that strong of a feeling about it. So I'm kind of curious to go back to it, however, like 7 years later, or however long it's been. Yeah, but I guess back to twist it around back to kind of the original discussion in that, yeah, like the finale in particular is a total mess. They just run around some corridors. There is no... You can never have a moment to get your bearings, and I think that's intentional to make you feel like the alien's, like, chasing you or on the run or whatever, but, like, there just is no tension. It just feels kind of like a Scooby-Doo chase through, like, a bunch of doors. It's really silly, especially since the alien this time looks like a doggo, and sometimes is, like, unintentionally cute. Like in an ugly way, I think.
Or a CGI monstrosity, depending on the situation.
Depending on the situation. But like when it first scampers away out of the ox, it's kind of adorable. It like hip hops away like Spyro the Dragon.
Well, I don't know if you might not know this, but this is one of my all-time favorite facts about Alien 3, is that originally, and you can find pictures of this, I'll do my best to remember to post it with the episode, of they were going to use whippets, like little miniature greyhounds, and dress them up as aliens, and that was what their alien was going to be.
I did know that! That's precious!
It's adorable, and you can find like test footage of like this dog just like scampering down a hallway with the alien head on. It's wonderful, and is by far my favorite piece of Alien trivia. It's so adorable.
God, I do remember hearing about that. Because, well, that's another thing I was wondering in the theatrical cut. I seem to remember the alien being born from a dog in this movie, but it was born from like an ox.
Yes, I was reading some differences, and it was in fact born from a dog in the theatrical cut.
Okay, because that makes a lot more sense for like how it acts. But yeah, anyway, okay, so good. So I did watch the theatrical cut when I was a kid. Anyway, that is to say that a lot of the stuff that makes it Alien is very by the numbers and dull. And you can see, even without sort of the subtitles and lost sound cues, letting you know exactly where, how in a lot of ways it's a very compromised movie, how it clearly had a lot of fingers, like, in the pot. As Sean mentioned, this this is one of the worst movie soundtracks for a major motion picture I've ever heard.
Oh my god.
I think that like there are two really low points. Like the soundtrack's pretty consistently bad. But the lowest points were there was a part, I think towards the first kill, where they tried to make the movie sound tense, but they used like a tuba or something, and it sounded like the sitcom background music that Red Letter Media uses in their Half of the Bag videos, as like this guy's about to No, exactly. And then he gets diced up. It's hilarious. Then the other really off-putting one is they have this like 90s grunge soundtrack during a scene where like a bunch of the prisoners try and content warning, I guess, but there's a scene where a bunch of the prisoners try.
Yeah. We're gonna really quick. This whole episode's probably gonna be a content warning, pretty heavily after. Let's just say this point.
Now's as good a time as any, because I mean it is an alien movie. It's a bit unavoidable, but this one in particular addresses it a lot more explicitly than the other two did.
So yeah, we're gonna put up a content warning for sexual assault and the like. It's probably going to permeate the rest of this discussion. We'll try and minimize it where we can in the coming episodes, but we make no promises. We'll do the same thing and put up another content warning if we're about to talk about something like this.
I think this will be the last time. I think this is the last movie that really leans into the trauma metaphor, if I recall correctly, because Resurrection's just kind of a shitty B-movie lark, and then Prometheus and Covenant thematically are kind of about something completely different. So I think if that is something that is like disturbing or, you know, something you don't want to hear about, I think this will be the last time where we really have to have an in-depth conversation about it.
Good to know on my end too.
Yeah.
So go on with your soundtrack of unpleasantness.
Yes, and this really stood out to me. Was like there's a scene where the prisoners attempt to rape Ripley, and the soundtrack turns into like this horrible 90s grunge that makes it sound like something badass is happening, and then she gets saved by one of the other guys, and it's presented as like a big hero moment, and it's really tone deaf and icky and bad, and the soundtrack is a nightmare. And it just overall, you know, Alien 1 was made in like 79 and Aliens was made in like 86 or whatever, but they feel, you can watch them today and the most dated thing about them really is like the technology and their vision of the future, that it's very analog.
But it works. We should mention that it still works really well in that vision.
Yeah, because there's a reason that like they went out of their way to replicate that in the video games in Isolation, because that's, you know, a cool aesthetic and just kind of goes along thematically with the very working class feel of the original in particular. So like, otherwise, like, you could shoot those scripts today, and, like, the way that they're shot, like, nothing about them is particularly dated, aside from some of the effects and some of the sets. This, however, feels very dated to the early 90s. It's got a lot of terrible CGI. The soundtrack, again, is the soundtrack. Feels very much, of its time compared to the first two movies. So with all that said, why am I defending Alien 3 if it has so many obvious problems? Why do
Because your taste is bad.
Oh. Old Snake psych meter goes down. My taste may very well be bad. But with this movie, I think I respect what it is attempting to do. I do think it is compromised, but I do think that, much like Spider-Man 3 that we discussed before, despite its faults, despite the areas where it had been meddled with or changed in pre- and post-production and been compromised by what was otherwise like an original vision by a director, I think it does very much thematically align with the first two movies. I think that, kind of like I said, this feels like the last time that the Alien movies are really about trauma, because the first one is very obviously about that, and the second one a little less obviously. But I think the way that all three of these movies engage with it is interesting, and they engage with it differently. So we're going to go ahead and call spoilers here, in addition to our content warning. Feels like a good time to do that, because
for sure
it starts off, I know that, like, you know, so there's kind of two main camps, from what I understand, of, like, the Alien 3 criticism. There's kind of everything that we just said, and then there's also the more, like, fan-invested view that, people really don't like that, Newton Hicks are killed off very quickly at the beginning, and aren't given much screen time, especially because the second one, you know, if we're talking about trauma metaphors, the second one is very much about confronting trauma and trying to build a life beyond that. Because that's, you know, Ripley, you know, finding Newt, forming this connection with her. She's going back to be armed, be more prepared, and try and eradicate the source of her trauma, like, directly confront it. And then at the end, she's kind of rewarded. She gets her surrogate family with Hicks and Newt and, you know, the wacky android who was split in half, but that's okay. He's still good. We'll put him back together. So who also cannot be put back together, and I like that scene a lot in this movie too, actually.
Speaking of a sitcom.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's understandable why people who are really big fans of Aliens in particular would respond very negatively to the opening, where they are very quickly dealt with. Hicks literally gets impaled by machinery. Charles Dance's character says, like, he never even knew what hit him, like, just so quickly, like, he was out, he was done. And Newt is given a bit more screen time because Ripley is very concerned, obviously, about there being a alien on board, very properly paranoid about that. And so her newfound family, sort of the redemption, the triumph that she got at the end of the original, is gone. And not only that, but Ripley herself dies at the end. Like, our strong hero, our icon of sci-fi and feminism and pop culture and all that, dies to the alien threat. It's a very cynical movie. It's a very dour movie. And
see, I'm gonna jump in for a hot second here, just because I don't necessarily, as someone who's new to the series in its entirety, and felt very strongly about killing of Newt and Hicks at the beginning, I felt the death of Ripley was actually pretty satisfying.
Okay.
I was not as against that because it felt like a thematic conclusion to her arc. I didn't like the death of Hicks and Newt as much because it felt like it undermined the second one a lot. And once again, I clearly am not a huge fan of the second one. But, like, it does feel like it just kind of went, it doesn't really matter. We're just restarting anyway. Oh my god, you know what it fucking feels like?
What?
A soft reboot.
Maybe. I don't know if I agree with that. I do find that interesting because that was part of me. I don't know actually how people generally react to Ripley's death, just because it's such a, like, I imagine when the movie first came out, like, that would have been a big deal, right? Like that. Mm-hmm. But now that it and Resurrection have happened, and, you know, Resurrection just makes such a complete mockery of everything. Like, I don't actually know if that was something that people would have been upset about, because it's hard, because even going into the movies, like, just from talking to my mom and, like, knowing about them and, like, reading the synopses and stuff, because I watched them so much later, like, I knew that she died at the end of the third one, because the premise of the fourth one is that she gets cloned.
Right.
So, I don't actually know if people found that dissatisfying or not. I do completely agree that I think it's a satisfying end to her character arc. Otherwise I wouldn't like this movie at all. But, I guess regarding the original issue, let's dive into that. Let's dive into the thorny issue of whether, the suddenness of Newt and Hicks getting killed off is appropriate, because I think you're right, and that, like, I was thinking about this, and that there are two kinds of sudden deaths, and I'm going to spoil Kingsman: The Golden Circle and Halo Reach, of all things.
All right.
So, but I think those are good. Those are good points of comparison for what I'm about to talk about here, because I think sudden deaths have either one of two effects on people. There's the Kingsman way, which is, if you recall, where the original team of Kingsman, particularly Roxy, particularly the female lead of the first film, is bombed and disposed of very quickly, so they can pare down the cast and focus on, like, the main character and the new characters. And, like, that's very clearly, as you say, kind of like a soft reboot. Like, they don't pay her much mind. They're there just to clean the slate, and move on. Get the... It's a very cheap, very lazy way of, like, dealing with elements of the first movie that are going to be inconvenient to the story that you're trying to tell. And I can certainly see the argument for that being how Newt and Hicks are dealt with here, because that is very true. Part of the feeling that they're going for, like, part of the tone is, like, Ripley being the only woman alone in this place filled with rapists and murderers. And, that doesn't work so well if, she's got, Hicks the Marine, like, looking out for her. And so, obviously, in that sense, they were both inconvenient elements. We need to get them out of the way. So I can see the argument for that. On the other hand, in Halo Reach, infamously, sort of all the main Spartan characters are kind of picked off one by one throughout that game. And there's one moment in particular, probably my favorite death of the bunch, where I believe you're just talking with your squad, and it's just a regular old cutscene where you're making plans to, like, go attack the Covenant base or whatever. And I think one of the characters is just hanging around. I don't remember the exact context. If it was, like, an argument, or if she's just, like, really antsy and like, jumps the gun. But she kind of storms off, kind of walks away with her shields down, I think her helmet off, and just gets randomly shot in the head by a sniper that happened to be nearby. And obviously there's a very distinct difference with that, right? Like, even, like, just seeing that we're not cleaning the slate, we're not getting that character out of the way because she's inconvenient. We're having her die to show how sort of, how dangerous the world is, the constant dangers of war, to make you feel a little shook that this, like, super powerful super soldier lady can just get gunned down like anyone else. It's there to create a very specific mood. Overlord did this a lot. We sort of talked about, like, that's another example where these sudden deaths are obviously trying to serve that sort of purpose. And so, for me, as a fan of the series, and as someone very much invested in the trauma metaphor, I think what puts Alien 3 and this scene more in the second camp for me is the scene where Ripley has Charles Dance performing the autopsy. And I like that, just in general, the way that Sigourney Weaver sort of portrays her panic over the idea that Newt has been violated by an alien and no one knows it. You can see that there's a lot of conflicting emotions going through her, like in terms of just being pragmatic, being terrified, being sort of haunted by the trauma of her various encounters with the aliens. She wants to do the practical thing, like, okay, like, double tap the bodies, like, make sure no one could possibly be infected. But also there's still the level of, like, her being a mother figure, for Newt. And this is even brought up specifically when, Charles Dance asks if, she was her daughter, and it takes her a moment, and she finally just sort of, like, you can see in her head that she's kind of got to decide, but eventually tells him no. So I think just during this whole scene, the presentation, still having that presentation of grief, but also within the context of there's this pragmatic layer to it, I think was executed very well, in that, like, she is grieving, but then also, like, you know, she starts, like, touching the body, like, trying to feel around for the alien, and people are like, you know, what are you doing? Like, and she looks very paranoid, and I think that's the other thing about these early scenes, before the alien actually shows up, is that there's this element, you know, if we're talking about trauma, if we're talking about, sexual assault specifically, one of the big, reasons that, like, sexual assault and rape culture is such a problem is that, you know, nobody believes you if you report it. And so I think it's not an accident that, you know, there's a sense where it's kind of a standard, like, sci-fi trope, like, oh, if I tell people there's a monster, no one will believe me. But I think that within the context of the Alien franchise, that sort of element of, like, not wanting to say what actually happened or what is actually there or what her real concerns are, I think that takes on an extra layer. And that's what I think makes some of her interactions with Charles Dance in particular more interesting.
So, before I let you go on, I just kind of want to double back, because I can tell you're about to spiral off into your own rabbit hole of themes and traumas and whatnot.
Yes.
I wanted to touch on, like, why I called it a soft reboot for a minute and kind of defend my position.
Sure. No, I am interested in this, actually, because I didn't think of it as a soft reboot. So, explain.
So, I agree, like, you positioned Overlord and, like, describing Kingsman and Halo and all that stuff is correct. I think the difference with all of those is that none of them could be considered soft reboots, because Halo Reach at the time was still in the middle of a thriving series. They weren't trying to reboot it at the time. It's not like Halo 5. Overlord is its own independent thing. It is just Overlord. And Kingsman: The Golden Circle, while it fucking sucks and was, like, just super boring and uninteresting, was not, like, attempting to reboot the series in any way, because, like, they kept the love interest and everything from the first one. So, like, I feel like that was more just, like, a stereotypical fuck this character type of thing. Right. I don't have a better way of putting it. It was the shittiest decision in a movie I've seen in a long time.
I think that was the best way you could have possibly put it.
It still makes me mad. But I think the difference with this one, and this could be more than anything a sign of just the troubled creation process of the movie, is just how quickly the Newton Hicks stuff kind of goes by the wayside. We bring Hicks back in briefly later on, but even that's still within the first third of the movie. The remaining 2/3 of the movie has nothing to do with either of them. And Newt, like, the heart of Aliens, just kind of disappears after this moment. There's not really any further reference to her or mention of her. There's no, like, yes, this is how Newt felt or something like that. She just kind of disappears after that. It was enough to show how the alien works and, you know, Ripley's concern for her. And yes, Sigourney Weaver did a wonderful job acting in this scene and whatnot, and displaying all this variety of emotions. But I feel like in general, it still got kind of washed out by the fact that nothing ever really came of it. It worked well to set a bunch of stuff up, but not so much to continue the story of Newton Hicks.
So I have a pretentious themey argument for why this might be, but when you mentioned the troubled production, and I want to actually give credence to what you're saying here, because so again, this is a very infamous, very controversial decision among the fandom to do this, so much so that the original plan was for Neil Blomkamp, acclaimed director of Chappie, to make an Alien 5 that ignores the events of 3 and Resurrection, where Newton Hicks never die. And, obviously that never came to be. We don't see what was going to come of that. But it just shows how, like, people who were really passionate about the series, really interested in the franchise, it's definitely a controversial decision, and particularly when it comes to the troubled production, Michael Biehn, Hicks's actor, was so pissed off that his character just got killed off willy-nilly, that, like, he demanded, in order for them to use his likeness at all for, like, those 2 seconds that he's in the scene, that they give him the same salary they gave him for his major role in Aliens.
Holy shit!
Yeah, he was really mad about it. And, understandandly, that's, I
was gonna say, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So that's a nice little bit of inside baseball. So point is, I think that also could have contributed to why the characters don't really come up again after this first sort of fourth. Just because troubled production reasons. I think there's a very real possibility that is the case. And also, I think you're right, particularly when it comes to Hicks, because Hicks is literally, like, they say he gets speared, and, they literally do never mention him again.
Yeah.
So
he becomes literally a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah. Like that, so I think...
Because he's a machine? Do you get it? Do you get it? That man got killed by a fan. Hey, this is editing, Sean. I just realized that I confused Bishop and Hicks, so sorry about that.
So yeah, those characters, I think there's a little bit of both. I think there's definitely a little bit of, like, we gotta wipe the slate clean because these characters are inconvenient, but I think that they do handle it in a way that's sort of thematically consistent, because I think that, if we're talking about how these sort of sudden deaths are handled, they generally are stronger if they hammer home that sort of feeling that you are never safe and you could die at any time, like, just generally speaking. And I think my favorite scene in the movie makes this very explicit. So I think that by having the overriding of the happy ending, the overriding of sort of the satisfying conclusion to her arc, I keep thinking back to kind of the last shot we see of the alien in the first movie after Ripley shoots it out of the airlock. And you can kind of see, if I recall correctly, you can kind of see that it's still sort of moving, or, like, it's a little ambiguous if it's still moving, because it's just sort of floating out there. So we've gotten rid of it, we've ejected it, but we haven't necessarily killed it. That alien, who knows if it can breathe in space? Like, it might just float out there until it lands on some other planet and terrorize, colonists or some other civilization, predators, whatever.
Oh no, is that the plot of fucking Covenant?
That is not the plot of Covenant, unfortunately. Okay. That would actually be a Covenant's kind of its own bag of worms. We'll get to that. But I'm very interested. I think Covenant's going to make you pretty mad.
Ooh.
That's my prediction right now.
I'm excited to get fired up about something as opposed to just tired.
Yeah. No, I don't think there will be a lack of things to talk about, at least, with the kind of the reboot, the actual reboot stuff. So, but, that's sort of the thing, is that, like, trauma lingers out there. After you're encountering with it, you're not really the same. And so that that's basically what I see the third movie by killing them off in the beginning, because the second one sort of takes the opposite stance, that, like, yes, this is horrific, this is traumatizing, but, you know, through, you know, human connections, through confronting it head on, you can overcome it and maybe live, like, something resembling a normal life. And Alien 3, and this is sort of the, like, dark, cynical core of the movie, is saying no, you can't. It'll always be out there, and furthermore, there will be new traumas for you to deal with all the time. And that's a hell of a statement. Like, I've been thinking about sort of the themes of this movie a lot, because that does sort of seem to be the thing that it is all leading up to. Because then in the other, like, sort of scene where Newt in particular, you know, Hicks is sort of forgotten about, the poor bastard. But but Newt in particular, this is my favorite scene in the movie, where they're cremating them at Ripley's insistence. And it's a little on the nose, but I think effective, where you have the kind of doomsday apocalypse cults. Their big thing is that, like, they're waiting on this planet to die, basically. Like, they're tarnished people, they're prisoners, their crimes are made explicitly to be, like, really, really horrible. So they've all found religion, and their reason for being is sort of to become closer to God. And the way that they say it is that, yes, it's a tragedy that she was so young, and that we lost her. But at the same time, at least she does not have to live with the horrors of life. Like, death is an escape for her. And this is made very explicit, because this is where we see the alien, you know, match cuts being born in the ox corpse.
Or dog corpse, depending.
Yeah, you know, depending. I don't actually know, because I don't remember this scene playing out like this in the theatrical version. I'm pretty sure they just tossed I think it's even more of a, like, toss them to the side and forget about them, because I'm pretty sure they just, like, toss the bodies in without the monologue.
Oh my god. My god.
I could be wrong about that, but the last time I saw the theatrical cut was when I was, like, 13. So, yeah. So I think, like, that's a very dark statement, and it's one that, you know, with the conclusion to Ripley's arc, in addition to just the moral question of, like, maybe I could be saved, but, you know, Weyland-Yutani's going to take the thing. Like, there's, like, horrible things are going to happen if I allow them to do this, and she chooses to die rather than live with the literal source of her trauma, like, inside of her. And so that's sort of where the movie falls on that issue of, like, no, sorry, aliens, you know, you can have your happy ending and that's nice, but, like, your pain, your fight is only over upon your death. And that's a hell of a statement.
So here's actually a question for you.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I was thinking about this. Is this almost stranger for it to be within the same series? Like, it's essentially two directors of the movie contradicting each other, which, like, if you're doing a rebuttal piece or something like that, fine. But, like, the fact that it's in the same series is just strange. And once again, it feels like such a stark contrast from Aliens that, like, it's hard to look at it as anything other than a form of reboot, especially with, like, such a fuck you to the motifs and morals of the previous movie.
It's definitely strange. It's definitely, it definitely feels like a rebuttal, maybe a former reboot. I see it, I see it as sort of like two divergent paths, and where the origin point is Alien. This is why, like, I think it's interesting to compare Aliens and Alien 3, because they, like, Alien 3 is very explicitly sort of a rejection of that, and I feel like in a lot of ways is trying to hold itself up as like the true successor to Alien. Like, again, you have like the more vulnerable situation of being on a prison planet where there are no good weapons to fight it with. They have to rely more on their wits and less on their firepower to try and deal with it. The tone is a lot darker, a lot bleaker. So I think there's a way in that it's sort of implicitly trying to say that, like, I am the true sequel, as opposed to, you know, James Cameron's Aliens, which I think is kind of an interesting dichotomy, because
what a wild decision. Yeah,
and I mean that's just the thing, is that someone it's often some conventional movie wisdom is that the Alien series is the same story interpreted by like 4 different directors. This is less true now that Ridley Scott came back and sort of reasserted himself as the central sort of figure. But I do think it does create for these interesting contradictions, especially because I can't think of another movie. I feel like there's got to be an example where there definitely is, but I just cannot for the life of me remember, where like a series will... Godzilla is the one I'm thinking of, because the thing about Godzilla movies is that it gets rebooted a lot, but a common element is that it always starts with the, like, 1949, whatever year it came out, original Godzilla, and then it uses that interpretation of what happened in the events of that movie to sort of extrapolate, like, this is what Godzilla is. He's, like, a protector of nature. Like, this is what Godzilla is. He's humanity's punishment for, dealing with radioactive stuff. And so that's what the Alien series feels like to me, and that, like, you have the central core text, which is Alien, and then, you know, Aliens and Alien 3 both taking opposite stances about what that movie means. And then you have Alien Resurrection, which is just a shit show. But yeah, so I think it's strange, but not unprecedented. Like I said, Godzilla is a good example. More recently, I mean, you can see the... I would argue that there's a very similar sort of pivot happening in the DC movies that are currently happening, like particularly Justice League compared to Batman versus Superman. I'm
gonna quickly jump off what you're saying right there, though, and just say, and this is gonna be a wild fucking sentence, in defense of the DCEU, superhero movies are kind of their own bag, because each movie can be so wildly separate from the others that I don't think that that's necessarily a fair comparison.
No, it's definitely not the same situation. I like just the world of movie making has changed so much in like the 30 whatever years between Alien 3 and like Justice League or whatever, that it's not really that comparable. But I guess like I think Godzilla probably is the better comparison, in that it's not out of the question. It's not unprecedented that a series be handled like this. If it is, maybe a little unusual. You know, the other interesting thing, I think might just have to do with the fact that it changed directors, and how different James Cameron and David Fincher are as directors. Not that David Fincher had particularly a ton of control over this movie. Like, he's publicly sworn it off just because of what a nightmare the production was. But, like, if you think about James Cameron, he's very much your classical sort of, like, popcorn movie entertainer. Like, he very much believes in, like, following the beats, and ending on kind of that hopeful note. Like, that's pretty consistent in all his movies. There's darkness, but, it kind of all works out in the end. And so, David Fincher, on the other hand, like, all of his movies, generally speaking, are pretty dark, pretty cynical affairs. And so the fact that... I don't know who else they brought in on Alien 3. I'm sure that David Fincher wasn't the first director, but also that I believe this was his first feature film, so, you know, presumably younger, wanting to leave his own sort of mark on the franchise, maybe has his own idea of what a proper follow-up to Alien looks like. I think the fact that it changes hands so much that even just with these first 3 films, we have such different voices, such different talents. Like, you have David Fincher, kind of the dark, cynical, like psychological thriller focused kind of guy. You have James Cameron, like the more bombastic, the more sort of like traditional Hollywood sort of figure. And then you have Ridley Scott, who is very much like a technical sort of guy. Like, he a lot of his films are less emotional or less like story focused in that way, and like but he's brilliant at like sort of set construction and getting great shots and like really focus on those technical matters. And then you have, I mean, we'll see this in Resurrection. I don't know who the director of Alien Resurrection was off the top of my head. He's French.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a French director of some sort. I don't remember his name either.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he had made like a bunch of art films before. I wanted to say Denis Villeneuve for a minute.
Ooh, that'd be really interesting, actually.
No, I was gonna say I'd love to see an Alien film by Denis Villeneuve. But then, you know, for the writer of that one, that was like one of Joss Whedon's first scripts.
Yep.
And, you know, that's another like
can of worms.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I don't know. I think Alien 3 is a very interesting movie. That sort of cynical darkness, I enjoyed pondering its ideas. I didn't always enjoy the actual construction of the movie itself. But I thought that it was an interesting rebuttal to consider. Like, I ended up thinking about this movie in relation to Aliens a lot, especially because I am a person who is very invested in Aliens. So in a way, the fact that this movie was so hardcore against it was an interesting sort of challenge for me. It was a challenging film in my eyes that it left me a lot to think about. So that's sort of what I liked. Even if it wasn't like the masterpiece that the first film was.
You fucking pretentious shit. Getting up here without being a challenging fucking movie.
That's a fair accusation. There is one last thing I wanted to talk about, though, before we wrap up. I know we're trending a little bit long. Is that the setting. I like the idea of this being on the prison planet. If we're talking about what is sort of consistently running through, and as far as like what does kind of fit in with the rest of the franchise, I like the prison setting because I feel like one of the key like overriding motifs of all the Alien films so far has been the people. It's been about the people that maybe society considers expendable. And so there's of course a difference between like the space truckers of the first film and the, you know, hardened soldiers of the second film, but at their core, there's still that same unfeeling hierarchy. Like, we are Weyland-Yutani, like, we are capitalists. The labor is just the labor to us. We only care about the product, which is the alien. And also, we are, again, Weyland-Yutani, and it's the same sort of scenario where they want the product, but generally thinking about military structure, like, the people getting killed in Aliens aren't, like, the generals or the people making the calls. Like, in war, there's always the guys sitting in their office sending the guys on the ground to die, and that's sort of what Aliens is about. So I think having the third one be about prisoners, be about criminals, I think is a really logical extension, and I like that they have the weird sort of apocalypse cult thing going on. The only thing that I don't like about the apocalypse cult thing is that
there's 25 of them.
That there are 25 of them. There are too many that we are theoretically supposed to care about, and I only remember 2 of their names. But also that it seems a little inconsistent with their beliefs, because we get a lot of build up to this idea that these are guys that are kind of waiting for death, and that's why they're so focused on this apocalypse thing. Like, you know, if you're talking about trauma, if you're talking about things that you always carry with you, like, it's sort of the other side of that coin, in that, like, if you're a criminal on that level, like, there's kind of no going back from that. And I think that the movie kind of teases this idea of, like, it sort of starts to address it. Like, there's the company man who freaks out at the guys, and he's like, like, y'all are just a bunch of criminals, like, who cares, like, you should be gunned down, you are expendable. And also this idea that of, like, trying to explore whether, like, you can regain your humanity at all, or whether, like, death really is the only release for you, that I think ends up getting lost and underdeveloped just in the chaos of the finale, just it turning into such a by-the-numbers alien movie in the last hour, that I think that it ends up getting sanded down. I know that in our pre-discussion you were talking about this, how, like, it kind of goes out of its way to, like, lionize and glamorize the redeemed, like, rapists and criminals. I think there's an interesting question at the core of this, setting, with having the people chasing the aliens be people who are not, like, easy to root for, but I think that the movie bungles it so hard in, like, the last sort of section, and handles it without, like, enough, not tastefully enough in certain areas, like that one moment we talked about in particular, to make it to really make good on the promise of, like, kind of, again, sort of a challenging question like that, but because we have to have an alien, and because we have to have someone kill it, we end up getting our heroic rapists, and that's it doesn't really congeal into anything, to say the least.
It's a bit icky, especially given Alien's whole idea of trauma and sexual assault in general. It doesn't sit well with me in a lot of ways. So that's kind of my final take on it, is I'm tired of it because it doesn't feel good.
As for me, this was a more interesting movie for me to think about and pick apart than I expected it to be. I honestly expected to have a reaction a lot more like Sean's, just because of how unremarkable Alien 3 had been in my memory. I couldn't even remember until I'd watched it again, like, what people didn't like about it. I only knew that it was considered bad. So I don't know. Maybe I do have shit taste. Maybe I am just a poo-poo head. But I feel like there's something there. There's something there. Something about Alien 3 that calls to me.
And you know what? More power to you. I will never watch this movie again, probably, because, wow, I don't want to. So
I probably will. Usually when I rewatch the Alien movies before, I would stop at the second one. That is probably the biggest praise I can give it, is that I now would like, when I do rewatches of the series, I would like to rewatch it as a trilogy and not necessarily just as a duology.
Yeah, that's pretty hefty praise, I will say. So I guess if you haven't, it might be time to revisit Alien 3.
I think it's worth doing regardless of what sort of stance you end up taking on it, especially if you haven't watched it in a while. Who knows? You might end up finding something in it that you really appreciate that you didn't, like, coming hot off of Aliens or whatever. Or if you're like Sean, then you watch it again and then never watch it again because you thought it was too boring. So, what do you have to lose?
2.5 hours. Or you might be able to take a nice nap during it. So, hey.
All right. Here's my Alien 3 rewatch advice. This is what I'm gonna say. If you're still not into it, by the time Charles Dance dies, turn it off and don't bother with the rest, because it's only gonna get more boring from there. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Honestly, even if you're into it, when Charles Dance dies, you're pretty much good to turn it off.
Well, yeah, I guess this is the last thing we should mention. I think that, really my biggest problem with the movie's construction is that, I like the finale. I like the resolution of Ripley's character arc. I like her confrontation with, Bishop, the human Bishop. But it could have happened like 45 minutes earlier because they end up catching the alien. And this kind of comes back to the whole like apocalyptic cult thing, because it feels like it's only there to justify the crazy guy letting him out after they've successfully captured it in a better set piece, I think, than the stupid running around in the tunnels one. So they could have just left it in there, maybe even have that hanging thread of, well, like the Weyland-Yutani guys can still let it out and cause a bunch of problems. No, you could have just captured it and then like have the question of, well, if the alien on board the ship didn't attach to Newt and it attached to this like ox, then like did it infect anyone? And like have that like moral quandary of what Ripley to do, have that be the last like 20 minutes or so of the movie, and it would have been a lot better. So I mean that's decent advice. Just after they catch it, just skip to the end.
Especially because like a death cult that's interested in seeing the alien, I think is a really interesting idea too. Like, there's definitely been movies that have done that, and my immediate thing is to jump to Bird Box, but that's a terrible movie. So like, let's talk about any other version of this type of cult. But I think that like that's an interesting idea, and there's a bunch of interesting ideas to this, because I do agree with Jackson. I think like the death cult is overall pretty interesting. It's just underwhelming in a lot of other regards.
A very compromised movie, no doubt about that.
I guess with that, let's wrap up our Alien 3 conversation. We'll be talking about Alien Resurrection next week.
If you got tired of themes and me being pretentious, don't you worry. We're bringing the memes next week.
All right, see, that makes me excited. I'm excited to like have fun with this again. What a concept.
I was laughing at Alien Resurrection when I was like 12 years old, so I feel like this can only go one of two ways. It's going to be the funniest fucking thing that I've ever watched as an adult, or it's actually going to be a secret masterpiece.
Oh, man. If it's a secret masterpiece, I'll be surprised.
It's not going to be a secret masterpiece.
Hang on, let me see something. 77% of Google users like this movie. So that's pretty low.
Yes.
And I had to explain. I'm going to talk about this on the podcast for a hot second just because I like it. Google users are actually my metric on how a movie actually is. Because if you Google it, it'll show up, how many users actually like this movie. And most movies, if a Google user has gone and reviewed it, it is a positive review. The lowest I have ever seen, I think, is 53% with Battlefield Earth, which is an absolutely terrible movie. So I think, or 34% with Battlefield Earth. Holy shit! So like a 77% to me says that this movie has its fans, but overall is pretty disliked. Because like a good movie will be like 98, 97%. Most sit in the 88 range. Anything below that is where it starts to get bad. 34 is absurd.
That's a really good metric, actually. Oh my god, I haven't thought about that. But no, I mean, I can totally see where that came from, because there totally would be, like, especially younger people who will give it a positive review just because it has aliens in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Ooh, man.
The Google metric, Google user reviews, I feel, are a really good metric on how a movie actually is.
That's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Shit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, if you're looking for something that isn't Rotten Tomatoes, it's a better way of doing it. That said, I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda, or check out my website, isortof.com. That's what I got. I got a Twitch stream if you want to come hang out with that, but,
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me over on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller. Stay tuned. Still under construction.
As always, thanks to Lords of the Highway. Or if you'd like to talk to the podcast, you can do so at BADH_cast over on Twitter. We just tweet out occasional updates, stuff like that. If you'd like to get in touch with the podcast as a whole, that's a great place to do so. As always, thanks to Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. They're a great band. They're on Spotify, all that good places. Go check them out, give them a listen, show some support to them. Very much appreciated. And as always, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com for hosting our nonsense, or like this episode, serious lore analysis. It happens now and again.
once in a blue moon, when the full moon arrives, the analysis werewolves, shed their human skin and roam the internet
and present something comprehensive and interesting and like an actual conversation about whether this movie is good, given its themes in relation to other alien movies. And don't just make jokes. Loose jokes.
Yeah, jokes in the loosest possible sense of the word, which don't you worry, my lovely horselings. That's what you're in for next week.
Ooh, be prepared. Because, we're talking about Alien Resurrection, as we said, so get ready for that. And, otherwise, bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go